Day. I've watched you over the past couple of weeks. You've made a lot of appearances. You've said goodbye to the troops in Afghanistan. And there's been some emotional farewells to the troops, which I think are quite understandable. There's an admission of the toll it has taken on you watching and knowing that you're responsible, partly responsible for these young men and women going overseas and into war. And then there was this, which caught a lot of attention when you spoke at West Point at the end of February.
In my opinion, any future defense secretary who advises the president to again send a big American land army into Asia or into the Middle East or Africa should have his head examined, as General MacArthur so delicately put it.
Now, in the totality of the speech was about the Army needing to readjust what it does, how it trains itself, that kind of thing. But I can't help but wonder whether you are leaving with regrets. As I watch you, I think you are sorry about some things, and I can't figure out what it is. Were these the right wars?
Well, I've said all along, first of all, only time and history can answer that question. What I do know and what I do have confidence in is that once there, failure is a huge challenge for the United States, and failure will have costs of its own that will linger with us for a long time, as was the case in Vietnam. So my objective in both of these wars has been to end them on terms that enhance United States security, that uphold America's prestige in the world and our reputation, and advance our interests. And if we can accomplish that, then bringing them to a close as quickly as possible, I think, is the right thing to do.
And when you say this, I know that history judges this, but I can't help but get the feeling from you that you've judged, at least in the near term, about these wars. And what do you feel?
Well, first of all, we had no choice in Afghanistan, I should say. We were attacked out of Afghanistan. And in a way, if I had it all to do over again, I probably would have used different wording at West Point. Because if the United States is directly threatened, I'll be the first in line to say we should use military force and that we should do so with all the power that we have available to us. It's wars of choice that I've become more cautious about, and being very careful about electing to send military troops in, or send troops in harm's way, wherever they may be, if it's a matter of choice as opposed to a direct threat to the United States. So that was really what I was trying to express, and frankly didn't do so very well.
Well, it got a lot of play, as we know.
It sure did.
So I'm just going to extrapolate here, and that is that you have, prior to it, if you had to go back, and you were not here when the Iraq War started, but that you question whether we should have gone to war in Iraq.
Well, what I've said is that the war in Iraq will always be clouded by how it began, which was a wrong premise. That there were, in fact, no weapons of mass destruction.
Using your measurement and your lessons that you take from recent history, where does Libya fit into this?
Well, I would say that the broader point that I try to remind people of is the inherent unpredictability of war. Churchill said something to the effect that once the guns start to fire, the statesman loses control because no one can predict what will happen. By the same token, I think the president's decision that we would go in big at the beginning and establish the no-fly zone in accordance with the UN Security Council resolution, and then recede into a support role because of all the other commitments we have in Iraq, Afghanistan, 24,000 people in humanitarian work in Japan because of their earthquake and so on. That was his understanding with the other leaders from the very beginning of this thing, that that's the way this would play out. So he has stuck to that. He made clear there would not be U.S. ground troops in Libya, and he stuck to that. So I think that he set a way in which the United States would participate at the beginning, and then once the no-fly zone was established, and he stuck to that. And I think that's been very disciplined.
But in terms of just the action itself of the U.S. being involved with other NATO members in essentially these have been aerial assaults, no ground troops from anyone really. I mean, I think there's some trainers and stuff in Misrata, but nonetheless, this does not fit your category of direct threat from overseas. Libya was not a direct threat.
No, but let's look at it this way. It was considered a vital interest. What was going on in Libya was considered a vital interest by some of our closest allies. Those are the same allies that have come to our support and assistance in Afghanistan. And so it seems to me the kind of limited, measured role that the president decided on in support of our allies who did consider it a vital interest is a legitimate way to look at this problem.
And yet your feelings about NATO, you've made pretty clear in some recent speeches. You don't think they've paid their fair share in terms of NATO, either in dollar terms or in troop terms. They tend to take positions in Afghanistan and elsewhere where they are not in the kind of danger that U.S. troops are in. So our plan was to go into Libya and then let NATO, this group that you think doesn't really pay its fair share in any way, shape, or form, take the lead.
Well, I think what we've seen, and they have taken the lead, and they have performed. I mean, the interesting thing is some of the smaller air forces, like the Danes and the Norwegians, have contributed maybe 12% of the aircraft, but hit 30% of the targets. So some of these guys are punching above their weight. The British and the French obviously have significant forces engaged. I think that the worry that they all have, and what I was reflecting in my speech in Brussels, was that because of the lack of investment in defense over decades, that their forces are beginning to be stretched by a limited engagement against basically a kind of a third-rate dictator.
Sure, and some of them are already setting end dates and everything. How long is the U.S. going to be in Libya? How long should we be backing up? We're not in Libya.
First of all, I think that the Allies are prepared to sustain this. We are seeing the Qaddafi government weaken. This is not, I think this is going to end okay. I think Qaddafi will eventually fall. My own bet would be he will not step down voluntarily, but somebody will make that decision for him, either his military or his family.
Somebody will kill him.
Possibly. And but I think that the Allies will be able to sustain this until that happens, and we will support them.